Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. As they downed one glass after another, the two soon found themselves enjoying their chatting session more and more. Before they knew it, they had finished all the drinks in the refrigerator. Lowering her gaze, Madeline realized there were already 7 or 8 empty bottles on the table. She uttered, Jonathan, I hope you can get rid of the habit of forcing yourself and stop setting overly strong goals in whatever you do. You'll only suffer if you keep going on like this, and I don't want to see you fall into depression again." The one good thing about alcohol was that it could help one to express themselves more freely, and what Madeline did was exactly that. She spoke from the bottom of her heart and sincerely hoped that Jonathan could be happier. Jonathan nodded and raised his gaze, only to find that the woman's face was flushed. It was obvious she could not handle the aftereffects of the alcohol. He got to his feet and leaned toward Madeline before holding her hand. He then said in a gentle voice, let's not drink too much. We still have a whole day of fun tomorrow, after all. Here, I'll help you lie down and get some rest, okay?" Drawn in by his handsome face and mesmerizing eyes, the sudden closeness triggered something in Madeline, and she stood on her tiptoes before planting a firm kiss on the man's lips. Jonathan was taken aback for a moment, but quickly responded to the kiss with equal fervor, his senses awakened by the sudden turn of events. The intensity of their kiss escalated, with Jonathan unleashing a fierce assault that left Madeline dizzy with desire, making her feel as though every pore of her body was emanating heat. It wasn't long before her breathing grew heavier, and she couldn't help but let out a soft moan as she lost herself completely in the moment. Just when everything was getting even more heated, however, Jonathan suddenly stopped. He proceeded to scoop Madeline into his arms before placing her down gently on the bed. I love you, Maddie. Now go to sleep." Jonathan gave her forehead a light peck. Madeline was hit by another wave of dizziness, and she felt as if the world was spinning. It was then she realized she was actually drunk. Her mind started to feel hazy, as if it were drifting into nothingness. After some time, her sleepiness took over and she eventually drifted off to sleep. Jonathan's eyes were shining with affection, and a faint smile spread across his lips as he watched her fall into slumber. Although he had no idea if he was in a healthy state now, or if there would be any unexpected situations happening in the future, the one thing he was sure of was that he didn't want to see Madeline sad. "I'm not mentally prepared yet. If I were to get together with her so easily, it would make it seem like I'm not really serious about her. I guess the time is not ripe yet, huh?" With that thought in mind, he returned to his desk and finished handling the remaining tasks. About an hour later, he stretched his body and closed his laptop. Turning to look at the woman who was still sleeping peacefully on the bed, he couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment in his heart. After taking out a set of clothes from his luggage, Jonathan went into the bathroom and prepared to take a bath. Meanwhile, Madeline, who was still deep in slumber, woke up in her dreams feeling parched. She immediately started looking for water and ran through the forest until she reached a waterfall. As the thirst overtook her, she quickly lowered herself to drink from the clear lake below the waterfall, gulping down the water eagerly. However, the more she drank, the thirstier she became, and she felt extremely hot all over. Unsure of what was happening, she glanced around and saw that she was surrounded by lush green grass and colorful flowers. Apart from that, the air was filled with a sweet fragrance. Soon after, she noticed that her soul was soaring. Fluffy white clouds were falling from the sky, enveloping her in a gentle embrace. Feeling as though she was at the top of the clouds, the gentle breeze brushing past her ear made every inch and every pore of her skin tingle. At the break of dawn, the smart curtains drew themselves open automatically, allowing the rays of the morning sun to illuminate the room. The glorious light allowed Jonathan to stare intently at the figure sleeping soundly beside him. Her dainty nose, luscious lips, and tremoring eyelashes made for a captivating sight. He had never expected the sudden turn of events from the night before. He was still showering when the bathroom door was opened abruptly. It was impossible to tell at that moment whether Madeline was drunk or conscious. Yet, Jonathan had no escape. The lust he was harboring was ignited by her sudden presence. Amidst the sound of flowing water, their bodies were entwined together for an indeterminate amount of time. Now that he was fully awake, the scenes from a few hours ago were seared into Jonathan's mind, causing a sudden urge to fill him again. By then, Madeline was already awake. She was wondering if the events from the previous night were a dream or reality. Nevertheless, the sleeping robe she was wearing clearly indicated that it was the latter. As she was in her own pajamas when she left her mother's room, she figured that it must have been drenched and left on the bathroom floor. In other words, he had slept with her while she was drunk the night before. The thought suddenly triggered a cheeky smile across her face, but it was quickly replaced by overwhelming embarrassment. Right beside her ear, she could hear the gentle sound of Jonathan's breath, while her body could clearly feel the warmth he emitted. Despite the overwhelming lust within her, she knew that she had to suppress it desperately. "I cannot embarrass myself again." Fortunately for her, Jonathan leaned in to kiss her with his burning lips, unwittingly giving her the perfect excuse. Closing her eyes, she let herself go by reciprocating his advances. Initially, Jonathan was planning to save himself until the time was right, but Madeline had clearly foiled his plan. After having his first taste, he realized he could no longer control himself. Taking her response as encouragement for him to continue, he swiftly wrapped his arms around her. A passionate session quickly followed. By the time both of them were awake again, it was already close to 12 noon. "Jamadi, Jonathan, are both of you awake?" Lorraine's voice rang out from outside the door. As if they knew what the other was thinking, both of them jumped out of bed and quickly put on their clothes. Thereafter, Madeline ordered softly, "I'll get the door while you pretend to be asleep." "No, it looks more natural if I go. Since you have a habit of getting up late, it's better if you're the one who's sleeping," Jonathan rebutted. Both of them exchanged glances before breaking into smiles. Now that they were adults, it wasn't necessary for them to hide their actions. As a result, both of them opened the room door together. The awkward look on their faces and the fact that they had fooled around for a few hours more than usual brought a heartened smile to Lorraine's face. Nonetheless, she kept her thoughts to herself and flatly suggested, "I found a local restaurant that's good. Let's head there together." "Sure, Madame Xander." Jonathan agreed with a nod. When Madeline turned around to look, her eyes widened in shock. She quickly moved her body to block the view of his neck, which was covered with hickeys. "Oh my God! I must have gone wild last night." Jonathan didn't realize the fact until he saw himself in the mirror while washing up. Upon noticing the residual marks she left behind, he gave her the side eye, sending her into a panic that he found adorable. Within half a month, Colby had proved that he was more capable than Linda. He gained the latter's recognition and she became his assistant. After all, he was the only person who could strike a perfect balance between the commercial needs of a business and the technical complexities of their research. That was James' evaluation of him as Flora Verba Group's CEO. As the company obtained its products from the Research Institute, Colby was the best person to serve as the bridge between the two companies. At the same time, he could supervise the production of many low-cost medicines, benefiting a bigger pool of patients. As Flora Verba Group released new products into the market at a rapid pace, Colby would approach the medical insurance companies proactively. His actions drew Peregrine's admiration, causing the latter to feel that he was a good candidate to succeed Roxanne. On that day, an international flight landed at Horrington Airport. A slender-looking woman, dressed in a suit and high heels, strode confidently out of the terminal. Behind her was a group of more than 20 men, all dressed in sharp black suits. Some were Epian, while others were Aplothians. Their ages were spread across both ends of the spectrum. The oldest ones looked to be in their 40s or 50s, while the youngest ones were in their early 20s. The entire group exuded a glamorous air and turned many heads at the airport. Those in the know could immediately identify them as an international business negotiation delegation. The intimidating air they exuded was to cow their opponents into submission. Orchid, 29 years of age, was one of Harvey's 3 official apprentices. As the first student who studied under Harvey, she was considered Roxanne's senior. Currently, she was the executive manager of GK Group's operations in Epia. She had flown into Horrington from Dartan to take over the company's Aplothian operations. The company was extremely disappointed with Roxanne's performance so far, especially after learning that she had established Flora Verba Group, whose share price had skyrocketed since then. As a result, the company's board of directors decided to remove her from all her positions. Meanwhile, Orchid kept her arrival from Roxanne so that she could catch the latter off guard and find all the evidence of wrongdoing required by the company. Soon, the huge management team arrived at the Research Institute unannounced. Even though Colby had never seen Orchid before, he could tell from the garden violet pin worn on their collars that they were from the company's Epian headquarters. With a group of burly men leading the way, Orchid barged into the building with her entourage. The first thing they did was lock the doors to the Research Institute's finance department. Thereafter, they quickly sealed the general manager's office and changed all the locks to the data rooms at the institute. Shocked by their brazen actions, Peregrine constantly demanded to know who they were. Just as someone wanted to call the police, Colby stopped him and explained, "Everyone, please cooperate with them. They are part of the Research Institute's senior management, and they are authorized to do this." Thereafter, Colby nodded at Orchid. Eking out a slight smile, Orchid said to Colby, "I remember you. You almost joined the company's senior management before coming to Chronicles with Roxanne." "That's right. I remember you too. From the way you stormed in here, I can tell that you're carrying out the orders of the senior management. That's why I have no right to stop you." Despite his words, Colby had already called Roxanne's phone discreetly. She was constantly asking him what was going on but didn't get an answer until she heard the conversation between Colby and Orchid. She ended the call with a frown before ordering the butler to prepare her ride to the Research Institute. Upon seeing everything was going smoothly, Orchid gave orders to her subordinates. Investigate all the incoming and outgoing accounts for this year and compile a list of all the technology patents related to the new medicine. All her subordinates sprang into action immediately. Soon, all the laboratories in the Research Institute stopped operating. The technical personnel came out, puzzled by everything that was happening. Colby explained to Peregrine about the ownership structure of the Research Institute and that Roxanne was not the sole proprietor. However, Peregrine retorted, Colby, I'm not well versed in all this professional jargon. But tell me if Roxanne was responsible for establishing the Research Institute and subsequent research and development, as well as all the profit-making operations." Colby kept number and nodded in acknowledgement. Despite being a subsidiary of GK Group, the Research Institute did not depend on any significant financial support from its parent company. At most, it only requested a small amount of money as the initial startup capital. Every subsequent expansion of the business was carried out at Roxanne's risk and expense. Furthermore, she would always report each expansion planned to the board of directors to obtain their approval before executing them. When Roxanne established Flora Verba Group, many members of the board even supported her in exploring profit-making options independently because they believed they did not have what it took to retain such a talented individual. Since you said Roxanne has single-handedly established the Research Institute, why should the parent company steal the credit? And that Miss Downey is just being pushy. A stern expression crossed Peregrine's face. Since he uttered those words right outside the general manager's office, it was natural that Orchid could hear him. As her expression darkened, she raised her brows. I know who this old Mr. Lomax is because my mentor told me about him. My mentor, Harvey Lambert, built GK Group from scratch with a group of investors. Roxanne has been working under GK Group and has not left the organization. Therefore, all her business activities essentially represent the company. Stop beating around the bush. You have no right to take any action since Roxanne is not here yet, Peregrine uttered in frustration while frowning. Before Orchid could react, Peregrine waved his hand and gestured for technicians who had worked with him for years to barge into the general manager's office. They immediately surrounded Orchid's subordinates and warned, "Put down all the materials. You're not allowed to touch anything since Ms. Jarvis is not here." Another technician chimed in, "Yeah, I don't care which parent company you're from. In this research institute, we only listen to Roxanne Jarvis. And we'll protect all the materials and documents in the departments of finance as well research and development at all costs. Let's report these people to the cops first. They're acting like bandits, grabbing things without our permission. It's outrageous." The sudden public outrage left Orchid and her subordinates stunned. They became even more petrified when more and more of Peregrine's men flocked into the office. Everyone turned their attention to Orchid, eagerly waiting for her instruction. Initially, Colby wanted to wait for Lucian to intervene once Roxanne became aware of the situation. He believed they would be able to stop Orchid, a new member of the senior management team who seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. He was taken aback when Peregrine demonstrated his influence on the spot. He truly deserves all the respect in the world. Giving in to Peregrine's pressure, Orchid's subordinates quickly returned the documents they had opened. Some of them who were trying to copy information in their external hard drives also had their devices snatched away. Peregrine walked up to Orchid and said indifferently, "I'm sorry. You cannot touch anything until Roxanne arrives. If you persist, I'll ensure you and the 30 to 40 men you brought here won't be able to leave the research institute." Orchid was completely struck dumb. She did not think that Roxanne's subordinates would dare to interfere with the headquarters arrangements. It doesn't seem to fit with Roxanne's management style. 3 years ago, Roxanne also led a highly professional research institute in Epia. At that time, there was no obstruction when the headquarters wanted to regain full control of the research institute. Meanwhile, as Caden began to accelerate the car speed, Roxanne told him to slow down, as she was not in a hurry. Lucian, seated beside Roxanne, looked away from his phone and spoke nonchalantly. Orchid seems to have a habit of choosing the perfect time to make her moves. Last time, when your research institute in Epia was doing well, she swooped in as the new management and took all the credit for its success. A corner of her lips quirked up. She responded with a wry smile and responded, "Yeah, the same old trick. Why don't you fight back?" Lucian wondered. Roxanne's eyes darkened as she replied, "I wouldn't have been able to build a team to achieve my goals without her help. She leveraged all her connections in Dartan and brought in significant investments, which gave me a chance to realize my dream. Furthermore, she has helped me during difficult times. There was a time when I had limited income after giving birth to Archie and Benny. It was she who provided me with financial assistance." That was why Roxanne did not intend to fight back. Anyway, Roxanne always managed to produce high-quality medicines and sell them at low prices before the takeover, ensuring that many patients could benefit from them. This time, she simply did not anticipate Orchid's swift action. She did not expect Orchid would come in and seize the management rights in just a year. Though Harvey was the key figure of GK Group, Orchid wielded significant power over investments and financial decisions within the company. After listening to her story, Lucian shook his head. "You're still too kind. In any case, you established the team and led them to achieve new heights, so you deserve a fair share for your contributions. Orchid is just treating you as a money-making tool. She's aware of your ability, yet she doesn't give you the compensation you deserve. That's just too much." Roxanne nodded. She agreed with what her husband said. However, as long as GK Group still carried her mentor's name, she could not betray him. After arriving at the research institute, Lucian carefully helped her out of the car before walking together to the lobby. They heard a commotion and turned toward the source of the noise. It was then they saw hundreds of employees of the Research Institute gathering in front of the building, blocking Orchid and her team. Orchid's subordinates all had complicated expressions on their faces. While some looked panicked, some looked indifferent. Of all the expressions, Orchid's was the grimmest. There was even an icy glint in her eyes. "Miss Jarvis is here," someone exclaimed. Colby and Peregrine rushed over and walked up to Lucian and Roxanne. Before Colby could open his mouth, Peregrine, visibly agitated, interjected, Roxanne, we can't just hand over the Research Institute to them so easily. It's our blood, sweat, and tears. We don't care about whatever GK group is. We just want you to lead us." More and more employees gathered around Roxanne. Upon noticing the frustration on their faces, Roxanne waved her hands to calm them down. Calm down, old Mr. Lomax. I didn't receive any news about this operation from the headquarters either. But this time, I'll try to work things out with Orchid." While they were in the car earlier, Lucian encouraged Roxanne to stand up for herself and claimed her rightful benefits. As more people gathered around her in support, she grew even more determined. However, just as Roxanne finished speaking, Orchid strode over, stood before her, and gave her an icy glare. What do you mean by that, Roxanne?" Orchid scowled. Suddenly, she noticed Lucian and was startled. This is..." After all, Lucian had a presence that no one could ignore. Even though Orchid often attended high-class events and thus had witnessed plenty of prominent figures before, she still couldn't help but marvel at his elegance. When she saw Lucian standing so close next to Roxanne, her heart was filled with disbelief. He's my husband, Lucian Farwell," replied Roxanne plainly. Orchid's eyes were filled with shock. "So, the news I heard in Dartan is true. Roxanne did remarry her ex-husband. I also heard her ex was a mogul, but I didn't expect him to be this handsome." Envy flooded her heart as usual. Why is Roxanne constantly blessed by fate? In terms of medical skills, she's better than me. Among Mr. Lambert's 3 students, only she learned the fastest and understood the most. Even he praised her for surpassing him in acupuncture. When it comes to research and development of techniques, she's always one step quicker than everyone else. Each time she attempted something risky, it would pay off fabulously for her. Now, I learned that she has a husband that anyone would be jealous of. How infuriating. "Greetings, Mr. Farwell. I'm Roxanne's senior, Orchid Downey." Politely, Orchid stretched her hand toward him to shake his. However, Lucian nodded coldly and reluctantly. "Nice to meet you, Miss Downey." It was evident he didn't like her much. Awkwardness flashed past her face before she turned to Roxanne with knitted eyebrows and questioned, "What's going on with this situation today? You have some explaining to do." It was taboo for a chief to disobey the company's orders with their employees, regardless of what company they belonged to. Upon sensing Orchid's intention to corner her, Roxanne changed her demeanor and replied slowly, "I'm sorry, but you didn't tell me you were coming. So, it wasn't the Research Institute staff members' fault for not recognizing you all. Besides, you would have tried to investigate the information immediately. An act like that would have caused an uproar in other companies." A gloomy expression was set on Orchid's countenance. "I can't believe she's arguing with me, even though she's usually obedient." Then she spoke confidently. "The company and our mentor sent me to conduct this surprise investigation. Therefore, you obviously wouldn't have been notified of this beforehand. Please announce to everyone that my team will helm the Research Institute from now on." Mr. Lambert has always been Roxanne's weakness. She should obey me now that I've brought him up. However, she was incorrect in her assessment again. Roxanne turned to Lucian, saw the look of encouragement in his eyes, and replied, "I'm sorry, Orchid, but I can't execute the company's order. There are still many things that haven't been discussed clearly yet. I won't hand over the Research Institute until then." Disbelief colored Orchid's countenance. She gritted her teeth and questioned, "Are you planning to ignore Mr. Lambert's order?" Firmly, Roxanne responded, Perhaps. We should discuss this in more detail. If we can satisfy both parties, I'll cooperate. Even though it has only been a year since we met each other, I can tell Roxanne has undergone massive changes. Did she become courageous because she renewed her relationship with her ex? Also, I should have thought about Farwell Group when she mentioned her husband's name was Lucian Farwell. Now I remember who he is. He's currently the #1 businessman in the country. Even though he never showed up on the ranking of the wealthiest men in the country, everyone knew the throne belonged to him. Even major corporations and bigwigs in Epia had to respect him. I'm equally shocked and envious of Roxanne. How can she be this lucky? She doesn't deserve it. I refuse to yield to her. Stifling her rage, Orchid demanded firmly, I don't think there's much to discuss. If you truly plan to oppose Mr. Lambert's arrangement, then there's nothing else I can say. Leave this place with your people now. She thought that would be enough to scare our oxen away. Instead, Roxanne replied calmly, I'm not the only person involved in this matter. Thus, I will hold my ground until the end. If you don't want to have any discussions, then that's for the best. Please leave now. I won't send you out. I'm not doing this just for myself. I need to consider Colby's, old Mr. Lomax's, and others' futures too. If F hand over the research institute to Orchid, she'll remove anyone who opposes her. Orchid's expression froze when she heard that. Gritting her teeth, she squeezed her words out in a frigid tone. It seems like you no longer respect Mr. Lambert. I'll explain the situation to him. Roxanne then ignored Orchid, turned to Colby and Peregrine, and nodded. Basically, she was telling them to return to the research institute and pay no mind to the visitors. It was Orchid's turn to suffer. Originally, she planned to rid of the existing managerial team. She didn't expect to face such fierce resistance. If I give up now, I'll embarrass myself. I can't help but regret not accepting Roxanne's proposal. I should have listened to what conditions she had. If they weren't too extreme, I could have agreed to them. From the corner of her eye, she saw Lucian smirking at her, making her panic even more. Roxanne played me like a fiddle. If I return like this, no one in the company will listen to me anymore. Swallowing her pride, Orchid requested, Roxanne, wait. Perhaps we should discuss this. It's my fault for being rash. After taking a few steps away, Roxanne turned and faced Orchid composedly. Is that so? In that case, please come to my office, Orchid. We'll discuss things there. Then she approached Peregrine. Old Mr. Lomax, please ask everyone to return to their stations and continue their good work. I'll definitely negotiate an outcome that everyone will find acceptable. While Peregrine was put at ease by her promise, he still couldn't help but remind, this research institute is your sweat and blood, Roxanne. You should think more for yourself. We never worry that there'll be a crisis. After all, the reward from Flora Verba Group is enough. Every technician is grateful for you from the bottom of their hearts. Feeling touched, Roxanne nodded. Peregrine then led everyone back to their posts while Roxanne took Orchid to her office. Suddenly, Colby grabbed Lucian's arm and informed, Miss J. Arvis asked me to take care of something earlier, Mr. Farwell. I need to handle it now, and I hope you can help. Without waiting for an explanation, Lucian nodded swiftly. Boiling hot water and preparing the coffee bean, Roxanne went through the actions leisurely after sitting in her office. Nobody else followed them into the room as Orchid sat opposite her. As the two ladies took their seats, they watched each other as frostiness appeared in Orchid's eyes. Roxanne, tell me your conditions. What do you want me to do for you to give the research institute to me? You're married into a wealthy family now. You don't need to work so hard on your career, so let's hope your conditions won't piss me off. Roxanne kept quiet, as if she didn't hear Orchid's words at all. Feeling agitated, Orchid fumed, why? Are you fooling around with me? Don't forget that it was me who helped you when you were in Epia. Without my help, you would have to sleep on the street and beg for food. Roxanne stopped cleaning the coffee cup. She looked at Orchid and nodded. I'll always remember the kindness you've shown me. That's why I didn't hesitate to give you the other research institute. And I don't think I'll have to repeat the great profits that Research Institute brought to GK Group. Orchid was stunned. She couldn't find the words to retort. Just like Roxanne had stated, the Research Institute that she gave to Orchid previously had marketed much new medicine. These medicines contributed to nearly 1/3 of the profits earned by GK Group. So? Orchid asked. Nothing. Since you mentioned the kindness you had shown me, I told you what I did to express my gratitude in return. Even if what I did wasn't much, at least I didn't wrong you. Roxanne answered calmly. The water reached boiling point, emitting a whistling sound. Roxanne used the water to make espresso. Soon, a delicious coffee scent filled the room. She filled the cup to 80% full before motioning for Orchid to take it. Orchid, have some coffee first. The woman hesitated for a moment before reaching out to take the coffee cup. I can't read Roxanne at all. When did this calm and relaxed manner of hers start showing itself? Obviously, Roxanne didn't tell Orchid that Lucian taught her current behavior. Whether it was a business deal or a negotiation, drinking coffee calmly before the opponent would give them immense pressure indirectly. Let's be straightforward. What do you want? Give me a number. How much grant funds do you want? How many benefits are you trying to seek for your staff? Orchid urged anxiously, unable to withstand the pressure anymore. Roxanne knew it was time to make her next move. She spoke slowly. Yes, the Research Institute belongs to GK Group. But then, we've patented so many products up until now. We couldn't return them just like that. After all, you should know that I rarely touch the funds given to me by GK Group since the day the Research Institute was founded. What do you mean? Are you saying you want to make these patented formulas yours? Orchid immediately put the coffee cup on the table, nearly jumping out of her seat. Then, her expression, which had just eased up moments ago, flashed with anger. Enovi. I'll never agree to that. These patented formulas are precious to GK Group. Why don't you be straight with me? How much money do you need? Roxanne didn't react, ignoring Orchid's outburst. Instead, she stated, all right. Here's my requirement. We have 13 patented products. We can only transfer 4 of them to GK Group directly. The fate of the rest has to be decided by the high-level management of the Research Institute, and we have to find a way to enter a cooperation sharing model with GK Group. Orchid thought her ears were playing tricks on her. It took her a few seconds to understand what Roxanne was saying. Instantly, anger filled her as she jumped up from the seat. Enovi. I'll never say yes to that condition. This is not a discussion. You are merely trying to extort me. Roxanne sneered when she heard the word extort. The technical personnel and I spent countless days and nights, not eating or sleeping, to achieve those results. What does she mean that I'm trying to extort her? Even though she was disappointed by Orchid's reaction, Roxanne knew how the latter reacted was only average and nothing to be surprised about. Orchid, please give it some consideration. That's the best option I can think of. I won't back down even if you ask Mr. Lambert to advise me. With that, Roxanne continued drinking her coffee in a relaxed manner. Listen here, Roxanne. I'll never agree with the suggestion you gave. Never. If you insist on being stubborn, then go on. After all, if we follow the procedure strictly, all of you will have to leave the Research Institute sooner or later. Orchid's tone was vicious, hoping her remarks would change Roxanne's mind. However, no matter what she said, Roxanne was calm and unbothered. Roxanne's reaction hurt Orchid's pride significantly, causing her to lose her rationality slowly. Just then, Lucian called out from outside the door, "Darling, I'm back." Orchid seethed with rage, jealous of how a successful businessman like Lucian would treat Roxanne with so much tenderness. Lucian walked in, his eyes shifting from the frustrated Orchid to the calm Roxanne, knowing that the negotiation might have fallen through. He smiled at Roxanne. I've dealt with everything. Roxanne nodded, getting Lucian's hidden message. Then, she said to Orchid faintly, Orchid, you are right. If we follow the procedure, the Research Institute belongs to GK Group. Okay. I've thought it through. I'll hand the Research Institute to you after this. Orchid thought she was hallucinating. She stared at Roxanne warily, questioning, what tricks do you have up your sleeves? Tricks? You're the master in that. You always plant a whole team in the Research Institute in the most surprising way. If old Mr. Lomax and the rest cooperated with you this time, you would have taken over those patented formulas. A smirk appeared on Roxanne's face. I have nothing to fear now that Lucian has settled everything for me. What's the matter? You tried to convince me to hand over the Research Institute with multiple reasons just now. Now that I want to hand it over, you're hesitating. Orchid had her doubts. But she nodded her head after a few moments of pondering. All right. I was only waiting for you to say yes. Anyways, I don't believe there's any way you could mess with me. After they settled things with Orchid, Roxanne and Lucian strolled out from the general manager's office leisurely. Colby was waiting for them at the Research Institute's entrance. Facing Roxanne, he reported, as instructed by you, I've temporarily transferred the 9 patented formulas to a company arranged by Mr. Farwell. The seal is still with me. Do I need to return it to them? Roxanne felt relieved upon hearing Colby's remarks. Using the time difference as an advantage, Roxanne stalled for time by asking to negotiate with Orchid. That way, Lucian and Colby would have enough time to transfer the patents. She knew all too well that she had nothing to discuss or negotiate with the money-minded Orchid ultimately. It's not a big deal to return them the seal and the Research Institute because we can purchase those scientific research equipment anytime. Colby, please inform old Mr. Lomax that he should play along with everything Orchid says and get all the benefits he should get. Then, they can resign individually and head to work at the Research Institute owned by Flora Verba Group. Colby nodded his head, turning around and walking into the Research Institute. A smile crept into Lucian's face when he witnessed how swift and decisive Roxanne was when dealing with Orchid and GK Group. I would do the same thing too, if we're in her shoes. Your business skills are getting better and better, darling. Lucian caressed Roxanne's head with his huge hand. Roxanne smiled happily. Of course. I've been learning all this while. Meanwhile, at the manager's office, Orchid was deep in thought. Suddenly, she thought of some crucial details, panicking. The woman immediately got her subordinates to delve into the Research Institute's patented formulas. In the end, the result came back. There were only 4 patented formulas left. Moreover, these 4 patented formulas had been given to authorized patent agents, a way Roxanne had used to earn enough cash flow. Damn it! This means I got myself a pretty much useless research institute. A furious Orchid scolded her subordinates loudly. What a bunch of losers. We should have gotten our hands on the patented formulas right away. Now it's all gone. These so-called high-level management teams were simply a group of losers to her now. She trembled angrily while her subordinates remained silent, not daring to talk back. At that precise moment, Colby knocked on the door. The door was actually ajar. He had witnessed everything that went down in the room because he stood outside, unwilling to interrupt, for he wanted to see more of their despair. But then, he decided to get things done. Colby walked over to Orchid respectfully. Ms. Downey, this is the resignation letter of the Research Institute's person in charge, Ms. Jarvis, and here's my resignation letter. I'm honored to work with GK Group before this. However, due to some health concerns, I can no longer work competently in my position, so hope you will approve my resignation. Colby announced his high-sounding justification for leaving the company. Orchid's gaze shifted to the 2 resignation letters, gritting her teeth. She was so angered that her heart thumped wildly. Very well. I approved your resignation. She peered at Colby with disgust, waving her hands to dismiss him. Colby was not ignorant enough to linger. He put the company seal in front of Orchid before leaving. Roxanne, you're quite something. It looks like I was foolish enough to believe you." Colby closed the door as he stepped out of the room. Unfortunately, Orchid's raging, thunderous words boomed through the door that one could even hear her from far away. It was dusk when the newly resigned Colby arrived at the Flora Verba Group CEO's office to apply for his new job. During that period, James listened to Colby recounting everything that went down earlier. He couldn't help but cheer for Roxanne's tactic of pulling the rug from underneath Orchid and attacking her where she least expected. That's why I can only work for you from today onward. Please take good care of me, Mr. Lon." Colby returned to Flora Verba Group first to prepare for the reopening of the research institute by the company. That way, when Peregrine showed up for work with the rest of the technical personnel, they would have a familiar face to turn to. Please don't be so courteous with me, Colby. You're an exceptionally talented man with excellent technical skills and fantastic business operation ability. I would have given you this position even if I didn't owe Roxanne anything to begin with," James said seriously. After all, he had a family business to inherit. "Shall follow your arrangements, Mr. Lon." Colby smiled. Okay. Here's the deal. You are the vice president of Flora Verba Group from today onward. You will need to help me out, okay? Don't just focus on the matters related to the research institute only." Thrilled, James took the chance to share his burden with Colby. His announcement took Colby by surprise. Colby had never expected himself to be given such a high position. He thought he would only be a supervisor after creating the research department. "Mr. Lon, do you want to think this through? Or maybe you should inform Ms. Jarvis first." Colby was flattered beyond words. James shook his head, waving his hands dismissively. "Even though she is the chairman, I have the right to decide. It's a yes from me, so don't refuse anymore, okay? Flora Verba Group will have our independent research institute soon. Once the news gets released, our company shares will go off the charts." Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.